"Please, don't look at me," she begged. The rancher looked and froze. The wind had a quiet way of moving through the pines that morning, slow, like it wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere. The frost still clung to the dry grass, turning it silver beneath the rising light. Out here, in the stretch between nowhere and nothing, silence wasn't strange. It was normal, expected, trusted. Thomas Briggs sat alone on the back steps of his cabin, a chipped tin mug warming his rough hands. He didn't drink the coffee for taste anymore. He drank it because it gave his fingers something to hold, something hot, something alive. The ranch had stopped being a home years ago. Now it was just shelter, wood and roof, a place where animals didn't talk back, and the dirt didn't ask questions. He preferred it that way. Until that morning. He first saw her through the line of birch trees near the old fence post, a flicker of movement, fragile, wrong. A wild animal might have stepped into his land, and for a second, that's what he thought it was. But it wasn't. She was curled up beside a rock, half wrapped in someone's discarded flannel, her knees pulled to her chest, bare feet scraped red, hair clung to her face like wet leaves, and mud streaked down her arms as if she'd crawled here, or been dragged. Thomas didn't move right away. Something in him froze, like the air had thickened. He stepped forward slowly, boots brushing against frost-bitten weeds. She didn't run, didn't flinch. She didn't even look up, until he was close enough to see her shoulders shaking. She was crying, but the sound didn't leave her throat. Just breath, just tremble. Then, her voice. It cracked through the silence like a branch underfoot. "Please, don't look at me." Soft, begging, terrified. Thomas stopped mid-step, not out of fear, but because her words sounded too much like something he'd once said to himself. On a different floor, in a different war. He didn't answer her, not with words. He just looked, and when he did, when her eyes finally met his, he froze. Because what he saw wasn't just pain. It wasn't just bruises or torn skin or dried blood. It was shame. Heavy, suffocating, bone-deep shame. And somehow, he knew exactly what it felt like. Thomas crouched slowly, knees stiff from years of riding and winters too long. The girl didn't flinch, but her breath stuttered, like every inhale was a risk. Up close she looked younger, maybe 17, maybe less. Her lip was split, one eye nearly swollen shut. There was a crusted gash on her temple, and her hands... God, her hands looked like they'd clawed through stone. Still, she didn't cry out. He noticed then how she kept turning her face slightly away, hair shielding her like curtains in a burnt-out house. "Don't," she whispered again. "Please, don't look at me." It wasn't vanity. It wasn't fear of being judged. It was something worse. She didn't want to be seen at all. Thomas stood and stepped back. The cold bit his neck as he looked toward the cabin, then back at her. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. He was no good with girls, no good with people anymore, really. And this was not something you could fix with a blanket and hot stew. He'd seen this kind of silence before, in the eyes of a boy named Daniel, years ago in Kandahar, a village boy who had stopped screaming the second the blast took his mother. He just sat in the rubble, wide-eyed and trembling, until Thomas wrapped him in a tarp and whispered, "Don't look. It's over now." But it was never really over. Not for Daniel. Not for Thomas. Not for this girl either. She shifted slightly, trying to tuck her legs closer, as though her body was something to hide. Her knuckles were scraped raw. Blood had dried in her cuticles. The flannel shirt wasn't hers. It was too large, too worn, too male. Thomas had a dark guess whose it might have been. He stared at her and clenched his jaw. Walk away. That was the clean choice. Call the sheriff. Let someone with a badge and clipboard take her in. Let her become someone else's paper problem. But then again, Thomas had seen what happened when people were taken in by the system, not protected, processed, photographed, forgotten. He had once been the forgotten too, after his father beat him bloody and left him in a field when he was 15. He remembered the way the social worker never looked him in the eye, just filled out forms, spoke in code, moved him house to house until the pain became normal and trust turned to ash. No. He couldn't let her disappear like that. He stepped back toward her, slow and quiet. "I've got a cabin," he said, voice low, steady. "It's warm. Got water, food. You don't have to talk. You don't even have to look at me. But you don't have to stay here either." She didn't answer, just trembled, silent. He took off his coat and held it out. She didn't reach for it. So he laid it gently on the ground beside her and walked away, just enough to give her room to choose. She didn't stand, not yet. But her fingers inched toward the coat, clumsy and small. That was enough. Thomas turned his back to the woods, to the road, to whatever devil left her here, and walked back to the cabin, leaving the door open behind him. She didn't come inside that first hour, or the second. Thomas didn't push. He left a folded towel, a tin plate of eggs and bread, and a tin cup of water by the door. The fire crackled low behind him as he sat in the corner chair, boots still on, shotgun resting quietly against the wall. Just before dusk, the door creaked. She stepped inside like a shadow, hair tangled, eyes darting, still barefoot. She didn't say a word, but she didn't leave either. That night, Thomas lay on the couch. She took the cot behind the wood stove, wrapped tight in 2 quilts. She didn't sleep much. He could tell by the way her breathing never slowed. But she didn't cry out, not once, in 2. The morning, she was gone. Not run off, just outside, sitting by the water trough, staring. And next to her on the ground was a leather wallet, torn at the edges, mud-stained. Thomas picked it up and flipped it open. The ID inside was fresh. A man named Rick Denham, trucking company out of Red Willow County, 42, convicted twice, once for assault, once for drug trafficking. Tucked behind the ID was a photo. The girl was in it, only younger, healthier, smiling faintly. Next to her, Rick, one arm around her shoulder, the grip too tight for comfort. Thomas felt his gut knot. He walked to her, quietly, sat on the step. She didn't look up. "Rick Denham," he said. Her shoulders flinched. Thomas didn't push. Minutes passed. Then she whispered, "He wasn't my father." Silence. "He said he bought me." That was all she said, all she needed to. The rage came fast, but stayed buried. Thomas just nodded, staring out toward the fence line, his hand wrapped tighter around the wallet. A truck had passed earlier that morning. Dust still lingered on the gravel road, a fresh tread mark near the gate. Someone had come looking and left, or circled back. He knew the kind of men Rick Denham ran with, smugglers, runners, the kind of men who thought girls were inventory. Which meant the girl, who still hadn't given her name, wasn't lost. She'd escaped, and someone would be coming to take her back. Thomas stood, locked the gate chain, checked his rifle. It wasn't paranoia. It was math. She watched him from the step. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." He paced back toward the barn, filled the water tank, checked the generator, every task slower than it needed to be. Because time was running out. And for the first time in years, someone in this world was worth running out of time for. That night, headlights cut the distant hills. 2 sets, slow, crawling, searching. By morning, the trucks were gone, just tracks in the frost and silence in their wake. But Thomas knew better than to feel safe. They were scouting, measuring, waiting. So he prepared. He chopped extra wood, filled every canteen, sharpened his knives, rechecked the generator's fuel, hung a shotgun behind the kitchen door. The girl, she still hadn't shared her name, watched him. That afternoon he took her to the back lot behind the barn, laid out his old Remington on a stump. Her eyes narrowed. "I ain't asking you to fight," he said, "but I don't plan on burying anyone I could have saved." She didn't speak, just stepped forward, hands shaking slightly. He showed her how to hold it, how to breathe, how to steady her arms so the recoil wouldn't cut her. Her fingers were cold, fingertips still bruised. But she was strong, stronger than she thought. The first shot cracked the quiet. She didn't flinch. A can fell off the fence post. He gave her a slow nod. "You got fire in you." Her lips twitched, just barely, the beginning of a smile that never made it. Later, they sat on the porch while soup boiled inside. She held the warm mug like a shield. He sat beside her, not speaking. She pointed to the jagged scar above his eyebrow. "That from war?" He nodded. She hesitated, then tugged back the edge of her sleeve. Thin, white scars, parallel, wrist to elbow. Thomas didn't stare, just lowered his gaze. "I wanted to disappear," she said, voice brittle. "He said if I left, no one would care. No one would even notice." Thomas gripped his own mug tighter. "My father used to say that too," he replied after a long pause. "Said boys were born to break, not be heard." She didn't speak, just looked at him with something heavy in her eyes, recognition and grief. He stood, walked inside, came back with a folded map and a key. "There's a road east," he said. "Old line of cabins near Bear Creek. Used to belong to my uncle. No one goes up that way anymore." She looked up at him slowly. "I'll drive you when it's dark, but only if you want to go." The wind moved soft across the dirt. Leaves rustled like whispers bet. Ween ghosts. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Thomas knelt in front of her, looked her in the eyes. "Because someone once helped me," he said, "and I didn't deserve it either." She didn't cry, but her jaw trembled. And in that fragile stillness, in that one raw moment between two broken souls, the air felt different. Lighter, not healed, not safe, but seen. It was peace before war. A fire lit, quiet and low, waiting. The wind shifted just after midnight. Thomas was already awake, boots on, sitting by the window with the rifle across his lap. He hadn't slept more than an hour. She lay on the cot again, quilt pulled to her chin, breath steady but shallow. Then came the sound, gravel crunching, tires slowing, headlights off. He stood and moved to the door, looked through the crack in the curtain. Two men stepped out. One, tall, lean, carrying a crowbar. The other, heavy, barrel-chested, with a pistol tucked loose in his waistband. They didn't knock, just walked straight for the cabin like it already belonged to them. Thomas opened the door before they reached it. "You're lost," he said. The heavy man grinned. "Nah, just picking up what's ours." Behind him, the girl stirred. Thomas could feel her presence behind his shoulder like a bird ready to bolt. "She's not property," Thomas said flatly. The tall one stepped forward. "She's under contract. Our boss paid for her, got the papers in the truck. She ran. You're harboring stolen cargo." Thomas stepped onto the porch. "If she wants to leave, she will, on her own feet. Not with you." The man pulled the pistol. Casual, confident, not aimed yet, but close. "We're not here to argue," he said. That was when Thomas felt her hand grip his sleeve, soft, shaking. But she didn't hide. She stepped beside him. "I'm not going back," she said. Her voice was a whisper, but steady. The tall man moved fast, like a strike, raised the crowbar, smiled. "You're willing to die for her?" Thomas didn't blink. "Every day since I met her." The tension snapped like wire pulled tight. The tall one lunged. Thomas fired again, this time center mass. The man dropped. The other reached for his gun, but from behind, the girl grabbed the crowbar and swung. The heavy man buckled, collapsing under the blow, blood trailing down his temple. Silence returned in a rush, like the world had been holding its breath. Thomas lowered the rifle. His arms shook. Not from fear, from the weight of choice. She stood beside him, chest heaving, crowbar still in hand. He looked at her, not with fear, not with pity, with pride. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly, though tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't want to kill him." "You didn't," he said softly. "You chose to live." The moon watched from above as they dragged the bodies to the back of the property, buried one, bound the other, called the only sheriff Thomas still trusted, an old war buddy 2 counties over. By dawn, the law would take over. But by then, they'd be gone, headed east, to Bear Creek. The sky was still gray when they pulled away from the cabin. She sat beside him in the truck, legs drawn up, wrapped in Thomas's old denim jacket. Her face was turned toward the window, but she wasn't watching the road, just the blur of trees and empty land passing by like ghosts. Thomas didn't speak. The radio stayed off. The engine hummed steady and low, the only sound cutting through the hush of early morning. Behind them, the cabin disappeared into the fog. So did the grave. And the man they'd left alive, tied and bleeding, would be found by mid-morning. Whether he talked or not didn't matter. What mattered was that they were gone before he got the chance. They crossed into Bear Creek by midday. No signs, no people, just a dirt trail that snaked between hills and led to the old hunty and cabins Thomas hadn't visited in over a decade. He pulled up beside the least broken one. The roof still held, the door still latched. It would do. She didn't move when the truck stopped. Thomas got out first, unlocked the door, let light spill into the dust. He brought in wood, a blanket, a can of peaches, then stepped out again. She was still in the passenger seat, one hand gripping the strap of her satchel, what little she'd carried when she ran. He opened her door, but didn't speak. The silence between them had become its own kind of language. Finally she stepped down, slowly, carefully. Her boots, his old pair, too big but warm, pressed into the dirt. She looked up at the cabin, then at him, and nodded. That night, the fire in the hearth flickered low and steady. She sat on the floor with a bowl of soup, cradling it like it was something precious. Thomas leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, staring into the night. No more headlights, no more danger, at least not tonight. She set the bowl down and pulled the blanket tighter. Then, barely above a whisper, "My name's Lily." He turned to her, met her eyes. "I know," he said softly. She blinked. "How?" "You looked like one." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. Thomas turned back to the dark. And for a long time, they didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The threat was gone. The world was quiet, and in the stillness, something sacred held them both, something too gentle for words. Not love, not yet. But something like the spring came slow to Bear Creek. The snow melted in patches first, then sheets, revealing the soft green underneath, like the land itself was learning how to breathe again. So was Lily. She spent her mornings walking barefoot through the grass, eyes lifted to the sky. She didn't flinch at the sound of birds anymore. She stopped counting the days since she'd last heard footsteps in the dark. Thomas stayed close, but never too close. He fixed the old fence, painted the porch, left wildflowers in a jar beside her window without saying a word. He never asked her to talk, never expected her to heal fast. Some wounds grow over, not away. One morning, she handed him a folded paper. It was torn from a worn notebook, edges frayed. On it, she'd drawn something. A tree. Roots tangled deep, branches reaching wide. And beneath it, 2 names carved into the trunk. Not spoken, not explained. But his was there. So was hers. That night, she cooked for the first time. It was just bread and soup, burnt a little at the edges, but they ate it together, cross-legged on the porch as the sun sank low and the air turned gold. They didn't talk about the past, not the cabin, not Rick, not the grave buried behind a fence 3 counties west. They didn't need to. The silence was full now, not with fear, but with memory, with trust earned in fragments. One evening, as Thomas packed tools into the back of the truck, she stepped beside him and placed something in his hand. It was the photo from Rick's wallet. But she'd torn it. Only her half remained. "I don't need to be that girl anymore," she said. He nodded, folded the photo in half again, and fed it to the fire. And when it caught flame, they both watched, like letting go of smoke. Years later, folks in town would speak of the quiet man who lived in the hills with a girl who once never spoke. Some said she was his daughter. Others guessed they were strangers who found each other too late and too scarred to be saved. But those who saw them planting trees together in spring, or heard laughter drifting through the pines in autumn, they understood. Sometimes family isn't blood. Sometimes it's 2 broken lives deciding to stay. To build. To not run. One evening, as the sun dipped below Bear Creek and the wind whispered like it used to, Lily leaned her head on Thomas's shoulder. And after a long silence, she said softly, "Thank you for looking." He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes and let the moment stay. Some people survive the fire. Others learn to grow from the ash it leaves behind, beginning of peace.